It's a Monday. That means it's time to chat with our guy, Jim Duquette. It's the GM podcast with Jim Duquette. I butchered that one. Normally, I'd go back and edit this out, but I'm not going to do it, Jim.
No, you don't have to
do it. No, Jim Duquette with
That's
us
my
every.
X handle, by the way, Jim Duquette GM. So you can,
Yeah. I know. Yeah. Jim Duquette joins us every Monday for the GM podcast with Jim Duquette. It's all brought to you by Flat Stick Pub. You can follow Jim on X. He just mentioned it at Jim Duquette GM. We're broadcasting live from the Limback Lumber Studios. Jim, of course, back east, and joins us every Monday to talk a little baseball here at pucksports.com. Good weekend, sir?
It was a good weekend. Now that the trade deadline is over, things kind of settled in, get back to the normal routine of just watching baseball, watching, teams good and bad. Of course, a little bit of reaction from the trade deadline. We had a couple GMs on my show this weekend. The Tigers general manager, Scott Harris, who was kind of talking about his moves. He wasn't happy with Jim Bowden, my partner, because he gave him a D grade on the Athletic, and he let him know it, which I always love and appreciate. They're reading it for sure.
What did he respond at all about why they didn't trade, or did they get close to trading Tarek Skubal?
He did address that. I asked him that question specifically. He said he did not get close to trading Skubal. It was going to be very difficult to do it. He said in that, and I've been in that spot before too. Like, you have to be open-minded in case there's just a blockbuster type of trade. Somebody wants to, blow the tires off your car to get Skubal, because he's this year plus 2 more, I believe, under control, and he's one of the top. He's going to probably the front runner for Cy Young in the American League, but he never got to that. So he said he didn't even get close to that. And there were a lot of the Dodgers were rumored to be on him, the Orioles were rumored to be on him. I had Mike Elias on my show also, and his overall feeling, even though he didn't specifically address Skubal. He spoke to how expensive the price tags were for starting pitching in particular. He got 2 at the deadline. That was their goal. Zach Eflin, the righty from Tampa, and the lefty Trevor Rogers from Miami. But get back to Detroit, it didn't seem like they were close to anything on Skubal.
Hey, tell all of our listeners and viewers when your GM show Jim Bowden airs and where they can where they can listen to it.
Yep. So SiriusXM on Sundays, 10 a.m. Eastern Time to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. It's called The Front Office Show. It's on SiriusXM channel 89. And he and I have every week normally 2 or 3 general managers. And we also, during the season, have the manager of the Kansas City Royals on Matt Quatraro on our show every week. So, this week in particular, we had Perry Manazian, who's the Angels GM. We had Alex Anthopoulos, the Braves GM, and we had the Tigers GM, Scott Harris, along with Mike Elias of the Orioles. So pretty busy schedule and show. And a lot of this was all post-deadline, trade deadline type of stuff. Like we had Jerry DiPoto on the week before as well.
Who did you, when you guys did the recap show there yesterday on Sunday, you do the winners, losers, grades, all that one. Who helped themselves the most, and where did the Mariners fit into all that?
Mariners were one of the teams that helped themselves the most. And a lot of people felt that way. Just not myself. My partner Jim Bowden did too. I mean, getting the offensive pieces with Arozarena and Justin Turner, a couple of the bullpen pieces as well, huge for them. And you've seen that difference right out of the gate. I think the Dodgers weren't necessarily at the top of that list, but they did specifically get the best starter out there in Jack Flaherty, and they just kind of stayed in that mix. I think a lot of people thought the Yankees did well with Jazz Chisholm, who you and I have talked about plenty, and of course they got Mark Leiter Jr. In the bullpen. Orioles did a good job. I think those were the teams of the buyers, and then the sellers. Teams thought. A lot of people thought Miami did a terrific job in what they got. They got a ton of prospects back, and we're not going to know for 3-4 years how well they did, but people thought they did well. And on the loser side, one of the reasons why the Tigers GM wasn't happy with my partner was they didn't feel, and a lot of us didn't. Our initial reaction when Jack Flaherty was traded was, wow, that was a lot lesser package than what other teams got for starting pitchers, especially rentals. Yusei Kikuchi, who got traded to the Astros, got 3 major leaguers for Toronto, and so there's only 2 prospects back in return for Detroit. But again, that's going to happen down the road. We'll find out for sure. But his feeling on that, and really as we found out later, Flaherty, there was a little bit of issue with the back that scared off a few teams, and the Yankees, although they didn't necessarily pull all the way out, they tried to renegotiate the deal, and that's how the Dodgers kind of jumped in.
Were you surprised that we didn't see more offensive players moved?
I was. I just thought this deadline in particular was the perfect seller's market. So why wouldn't you try to sell us another offensive piece as well as the pitching? Now the guy that kind of stands out that didn't get moved was Luis Robert Jr. with the White Sox. He was, I think, the highest profile, and he's had some injuries himself, but. They did trade Eloy Jimenez, which I was surprised the Orioles picked him up. And, of course, right out of the gate, he didn't do anything for the White Sox. He's got all these injuries. And then right out of the gate, he has like 3 hits yesterday for the Orioles. A couple nights before, he had he's had hits in 3 straight games and looks like the old Eloy Jimenez. So if you're the GM of the White Sox, you just you just throw your hands up like, what the heck's going on here? But yeah, I thought it was a perfect time. I'm sure I'm missing some other offensive players that didn't get moved, but that was one. Vladdy Jr. You and I talked about him how often. It seems though that with his OPS now over 900, it's still like, hey, they're still trying to sign him, long term, and that contract's going to be expensive, but Toronto can afford him, and I think they need to keep him.
Well, go back for Luis Robert Jr. just for a quick second. I mean, the injuries, he's been unable to really stay healthy for his entire career. Is there something else there? I mean, the Mariners saw him that series before the deadline, and he looked like a guy that was done with baseball, uninterested. Right. He was dogging it that entire series. Is there an element of that with him, like buyer beware of his hustle?
The injuries and the hustle, I think, definitely stand out. I think being on a losing team, as we saw with Jimenez, and it is tough. They're in the middle of the stretch of this longest losing streak in their franchise, and they're up against how close they are to tying the American League record. In fact, if they lose tonight, they'll tie the Orioles record for most consecutive losses in a row. That's 21. The Major League record's 23. There's a good chance they can get to there too. So congrats to the White Sox, I guess. I think that is part of it. You hit on it, Robert. On a losing team, there are guys, and I've had them before too, where if you have a veteran team and you're a winning team, then you love having them on your club. But boy, if you are a struggling team, you don't, they're bad for the clubhouse chemistry, and it's a bad look overall. And so those are kind of risky guys to trade for. And if the asking price is high, you know what? You just kind of move in the other direction and tend to kind of let them go.
Not a position player, but a pitcher, and then he threw his first no-hitter this weekend. First time he'd ever went into the 9th inning. Blake Snell, the Giants. Can you make sense of what the Giants were doing? If it is a seller's market, and you saw the return that pitchers were getting, why did they not move him? Or did they try to move him and the asking price was too much?
I think they tried to move him. You were hearing his name mentioned a lot. They couldn't get the full value. And Snell's contract is a little complicated because it's really a 2-year deal with an opt-out, right? So if he's pitching poorly, which he, prior to the deadline, he had 4 really good starts, but he hadn't thrown the no-hitter yet. You're like, geez, if he goes back to old Blake Snell, earlier in the season Blake Snell, which he missed spring training, there's a lot of reasons why he didn't pitch well. But if he goes back to that, you've got him for $30 million plus next year, and I have to give up quality prospects back. And I think that's what prevented teams from trading for him. And then, of course, he throws a no-hitter his next outing. And it looks like now, after the last 5 starts, that he would likely opt out, and try to get that multi-year contract. But yeah, it was hit or miss with Snell, and I believed in a guy, but I wouldn't have been giving up top prospects for him in return for him.
He's an interesting. I mean, he's from here, and I'm sure you know that, and he's he made no secret that I think he wants to come back here at some point, or wanted to come back here and pitch. He is a 2-time Cy Young Award winner. He oozes talent everywhere. He took a moment after the no-hitter to take a shot at his critics, saying, well, now they can stop saying I can't pitch late into games, I can't pitch a complete game, all of that. Which I it's great. I mean, I like when players have a little chip on their shoulder and they use that as motivation. But I mean, it's not untrue. I mean, how do you look at Blake Snell? Because he is an amazing pitcher, but you look at his career, he's not one to work late into games. No. It's very rare that he pitches 7 innings.
Yeah. And he runs high pitch counts. His command, has always been spotty at best. The 2 years that he won the Cy Young were fantastic. The 4 years in between that weren't very good. He didn't, he pitched 120 at the most, 120 innings in a season in between the 2 Cy Youngs. So, there's some issues there. I'm trying to think. There are position players that have had similar, let's say, rough careers up until they get close to their free agent season. Corey Seager is one of those, where I think he had 2 full seasons before he signed that huge deal with the Rangers, over $300 million. So, I feel like, and he didn't have to prove back-to-back seasons of him showing health before he got that deal with the Rangers. I feel like with Snell, if he could give 2 seasons of, really good, last year at Cy Young and then this year, let's say he finishes really strong the rest of the way, that some of those doubts will be cast aside a little bit and he may get that multi-year contract that he's looking for.
Yeah, he's just where does he go down of his generation of pitchers?
Boy, you have to look at guys with multiple Cy Young Award winners like Lincecum. Lincecum had this really big burst of, I think it was back-to-back Cy Youngs, and then some really good seasons, like 4 seasons, but then he faded before that. There just isn't a pitcher like Snell that I can think of that has, it's like all or nothing type guys, 2 Cy Youngs and then all these injuries. Like I can't find that guy out there besides him.
I mean, you look at last year, I was just looking it up real quickly, and if I miss a game, I apologize, but when he won the Cy Young, I mean, he pitched only 3 times he completed 7 innings. And listen, I know it's a different game now. I get that, but his reaction to the critics doubting him that he could work late. You've never done it before,
right? But just because he went into the, so he had never gone into the 8th either. So he had never pitched in the 8th, never pitched through the 9th, never had a complete game. Just because wild. You have one doesn't mean that everybody thinks that you could now do it, right? I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah, that was my reaction to it. Is like, well, it's over now. Now no one can stop asking me about it. I'm like, you've done one time, and just because you did it one time doesn't mean people can't stop asking about it. He is, but for 6 innings, he is. Oh boy, he is one of the best.
He is so nasty. He really is. He's fun, and I'm trying to think like a Mariners pitcher like him. Like most of those guys go 7, right? So it's like I don't even think there's a guy that stands out like Gilbert's done more than that. Castillo, Kirby. I mean, he's just such a rare guy. There's nobody really that I can come up. I remember, here's one very early in Verlander's career. I want to say Jack Morris criticized him because he didn't, I think, go deeper into the game than normal. And a lot of it was pitch count related. Like he would ease into the game and would have a hard time, because he'd run out of pitches, and he kind of took it to heart, and then he went off after that, and he's going to be a Hall of Famer. I think Scherzer was similar. Scherzer didn't give you, and then as soon as he signed his big deal, he went off, started giving you complete games. So I think there are pitchers that are out there, but I think Snell is still kind of saddled by the fact that he was taken out of that World Series game that Kevin Cash did, in front of the Dodgers.
Sure. Is it just a change in philosophy or how these pitchers are now, Jim, that they want to try and strike everyone out?
Well, that is a big part of it. It's and it's not just pitchers, but it's teams. Teams will go, listen, we have enough bullpen. We have guys that throw 96 or harder miles an hour fastball wise. We got 4 guys, 5 guys. Just go as hard as you can for as long as you can. If it's 80 pitches and your max effort and you get us through 5 or you get us through 6, we'll pick you up from there. 2 times through the lineup, that 3rd time through the lineup, they don't let a lot of starters go. So I think that's a big part of it, and this has been going on now for at least the last 10 years.
Is the Jamie Moyer style in pitching dead? Is that over? Is there anyone that pitches like him in baseball right now?
There aren't a lot of them. There's a few, the Mets have a couple, but they have Jose Quintana. His fastball average is like 90 miles an hour. Sean Manaea is a little bit better fastball-wise, but he's kind of a mix and match, 5 or 6 different pitches. There's only a couple of those guys out there, that low velocity, mix and match and fastball, changeup, curveball like that. There's just, and Moyer, would be good even, I think, these days because, right now you see guys have 5 or 6 pitches, like Michael Lorenzen from the right side throws low 90s, but he's got like 6 different pitches. He throws three different pitches to right-handers, and he throws 3 different ones to lefties, right? And so Seth Lugo, very similar. He's had a successful season there with the Royals. So there are guys there that are kind of, changing their pitch sequencing and the types of pitches, which you never used to see. So, in a lot of ways, it is different. But I still think you have a couple guys like a Moyer type.
Yeah. What did you make of the Mitch Garver situation? He was very candid, Jim, in his comments to Daniel Kramer of MLB.com, and then Ryan Divish, of course, joins this show twice a week of the Seattle Times, talking openly about his struggles, and it was alarming sometimes from a human standpoint of how he was talking.
Yeah.
Where I think anybody who's sympathetic or has empathy could say, let's take a step back and see if the person is right here before we start getting into baseball stuff. But he talked about, I don't know if I can turn it around. In fact, he goes, I think it may get worse. And then talked about the death threats and things that he's been hearing online, social media wise. I mean, how do you handle something like that? If you were the GM, if you were Jerry Dipoto, how do you handle the Garver situation?
Well, I mean, it is a tough one, right? Because he's been weighed down by this, and partly, you and I spoke about this very early with Garver. Was you're asking a guy to be a full-time player when he really wasn't a full-time player prior to that. So, but he was, he's paid like a full-time player now. You need him to produce, but the human element always plays into this. And, I think that there's a mental aspect, mental skills aspect, but there's also just a mental health aspect. So there's 2 different ways, right? It's performance-based, and it's also health related. And I think the health related aspect is what would concern me at the moment, making sure that him, Garver as a person, is okay. So I think that's the area that they need to address, before they address any of the baseball aspect of it. You can't expect any type of success without, figuring out the personal side of things. So I think, certainly you would get him help behind the scenes. But he seemed to be crying out, right, publicly on that, and also exposing some things that, from the social media side of things are just absolutely terrible. And you see it with other players. But players don't speak about it nearly as much, that access that fans have and some of these people have through social media.
I mean, I would, if I would encourage every player just to get off of it.
Just get out.
I just don't think it's worth it. I get building your brand and being out there, and it's good to promote the game, but it's, there's just too much of it, and it's not healthy for people to see that stuff, So whether he's on it, or I would even say to his family, if they're on it and saying, God, you should see what they're saying about you, that doesn't help.
No, it doesn't help. I mean, in a smaller circumstances, smaller setting, it's similar, not quite the same. I don't want to compare, death threats to this, but trade deadline conversation where family, a lot of times players are like, I don't watch and don't listen to the trade deadline because all it does is make them anxious. They're set in where they are. They don't want to be traded. There's a whole upheaval that comes with their family, and so they don't watch. And sometimes their family will, and then their family will let them know. And they're like, and they will tell their family, I don't want to know. Don't tell me.
Right.
And they'll get off the social media like you suggested. Like this is another side of things in case where you don't want family, friends, anything like that to tell you any of this stuff. And honestly, there's a safety issue that Major League Baseball, I think, needs to get involved with and investigate and pursue some of these people to make sure there's nothing nefarious here, and second of all, to try to stop it. I think that's another area that I don't know if MLB has been doing it, but they have a whole different security department that should be focused on something like that, including the Players Association and what they can do from their perspective too.
What do you do if he doesn't turn it around? I mean, can you envision these guys eating the contract? We've seen the Astros do it, but you are committed to him for another year, and you're also committed to Haniger for another year.
Right.
I mean, you're talking almost $30 million they've got locked up in those two guys.
I would be surprised that they would cut ties with both of those guys after the season's over. I think that a lot of times you see first-year players, struggle, and you have a reset. You go back, you leave, you come back, from the winter with a different mindset and get off hopefully next year to a good start. Now, we saw this with Winker. Jesse Winker was not the most positive person either. And, Jerry was able to manufacture a trade for him. I think he went to Milwaukee that time, right? So he has done this before, but those are hard deals to find. It's hard to match up, we'll call it bad contract for bad contract type of deals, and if you're going to have two of them, like that's almost impossible. So, for me, Haniger now, all of a sudden starting to swing the bat a little bit better. He's been feeling it, and he looks different, looks better. So maybe you can resurrect that, and maybe that looks different. But with Garver, I think he's yours at least into next season. That's what happened with the Astros with Jose Abreu. Like they kept him for like another half season. He still didn't figure it out, and then they cut him.
What do you chalk up their recent? I mean, not on the game on Sunday, but their recent offensive success. The additions of Turner, Robles has been here for a bit, but also Arozarena. How different does it make this Mariners lineup with those three additions?
Well, it really makes a big change. I think Robles. I had Scott Service on my show last week, and he spoke about Robles in particular. But he's done something that he never did with the Nats, right? And all of a sudden he's hitting. He's in the leadoff spot. He's kind of handled that role until you see JP come back and Julio come back. So they've done this without those two guys too, which is amazing. But I think that there's a mental aspect of hitting where you feel like you're the only guy that can get the job done, and there's a pressing issue that happens. And I think you saw that with this lineup until you got some reinforcements. Now they're swinging it back. They're all swinging it a little bit differently and better. Polanco is, during his last 22 games, I was looking this up. He's got a slug of 460 plus his last 22 games. And that's looked different too. And Scott even mentioned that, a week ago, and he's continued to swing it. So there are a few more guys that are contributing than what we've seen in the past. I don't think it's a coincidence because you added those bats that were so desperately needed that, you're starting to see the lineup look a little bit better and a little bit different.
The fan base is so excited about Victor Robles right now. You can talk about this on your show coming up on Sunday. Bring it up. You and Jim, I want you guys to bring this up on the front office show coming up on Sunday there on Sirius XM, is that they already want to sign him to an extension.
I love it. But how many games has he been there? Not even 20?
36 games.
Yeah, he hasn't even been there a quarter of the season, and now they want an extension.
What would he's playing this year? I think it's $750,000, what Seattle gave him.
Minimum salary.
Okay, what would he throw out a figure? Let's say he continues to do this for the rest of the year. Yep. And Dipoto and the Mariners say, you know what? He's 27. Still relatively young, maybe getting out of Washington without all the hype and the prospects and everything that he was billed to be, and it didn't come to fruition. We want to give him something. For those out there, Mariner fans who want the team to give him an extension, play with them for a second.
Yep.
Give me something. Give me what would a realistic contract look like.
So Robles came in, I was just double checking to see, he came into the season based off of his struggles. He was going into his last year of service time with the Nationals. He's making, I think I have it there is $2.65 million. That's what the Nats were going to pay him. That's his arbitration year. That is well below what anyone of any type of productivity would be getting in his final year of arbitration. So, he has a long history of struggling. And, I think that if you were to go to him and guarantee him a salary, right, and it was, let's say it was twice what he made there for the Nats. Let's say it was $5.5 million, 1 year deal. Because here's the thing. You could try to, you don't really want to give him a multi-year contract because he might go back to old Victor Robles, right? His old Victor Robles as a major leaguer, his career stats are 242, 316, 364. That is well below average offensive player. So if you give him a multi-year contract, you might be talking about this next year that, hey, this is a contract you can't get rid of, like you have Haniger, like you feel like with Haniger right now, and Garver, right? So 1 year deal. There's no bad 1 year deal out there, in my opinion. But if you doubled his salary, say, we'll give you $5.5 million. And worst case scenario, he goes back to his old ways and he plays really good defense, it would be worth it there. And you maybe give him some incentives, performance bonuses for, plate appearances and, little things of that nature. I think it would be hard for him to say no, personally, because, because there is so much uncertainty to that point, and then he can prove to everybody that maybe he's figured some things out in Seattle.
How does the let's compare the two schedules right now for the Mariners and the Astros. M's currently up as we record this here on Monday, up 1 game on Houston. They have an off day on Monday. They'll start a 3-game series. Well, the M's with the Tigers. Juicy pitching matchup, by the way, coming up on Wednesday. It's going to be George Kirby against Tarek Skubal, and then they got the Mets to wrap up their homestand, and then they'll head out where they'll face Detroit and Pittsburgh, and then the Dodgers. Houston, meanwhile, and again, who is just a game back of the M's in the American League West. Houston starts a series on the road tonight against Texas. Then they'll be at Boston, at Tampa Bay before coming back against Chicago and Boston. Compare and contrast those two as we look ahead as this race for the American League West title, hopefully, and most likely will come down to the very last weekend and maybe the very last game.
Yeah, well, I think both teams have had struggles on the road, but you're talking about a different team right now with Seattle, the way they're playing offensively and mindset wise, and it's a little weaker, right? Detroit twice should be able to make up a lot of ground there. Pittsburgh, I feel like is starting to fade a little bit. So going into Pittsburgh won't be easy, and you got to face their pitching, but your pitching matches up with them. And Dodgers right now we'll see how things change in basically 10 days when you play them at Dodger Stadium. But right now they are not clicking on all cylinders, and they have several of their offensive players missing, including Mookie Betts and Max Muncy. Mm-hmm. So that stretch there for me favors the Mariners, and versus what the Astros have. The Red Sox are fading a little bit, but they're still over 500. Texas still thinks they're in it, and that's always an interesting matchup between those two teams. Tampa's gotten better since the trade deadline, even though they were selling off. They're unbelievable. Of course, they get the White Sox, which White Sox are terrible. But it's that stretch. Until we speak next or going into the following week, really favors the Mariners for them to pick up a couple more games. They picked up 2 in the last 9 days. They're 6-9 versus Houston's, I think, 4 of 9, 6 of 9 wins versus 4 of 9 wins. But I think if they could pick up 2 more, it's not unrealistic to think they could pick up 2 more games over the next 10 days or so.
Who's this year's Arizona Diamondbacks, if there is one?
Boy, that's a good question. Team that maybe sneaks in. I don't know.
I mean, the team that you cover, the Mets?
Could be the Mets. Yeah, could be. Well, if they can get in, I feel like they're starting to fade a little bit. But if they could get in, that's one team. Padres, they're playing a lot better. They didn't get in last year, but I think in the National League, it could be the Cardinals. Cardinals are kind of sitting there.
Royals?
On the American League side, I'd say it's the Royals. Yeah. Okay. Actually, that's the better comparison because 2 years ago, the Diamondbacks had lost 90-something games. I think it was 100 games, and then ended up getting the 84 wins. Kansas City lost over 100 games there last year, and right now are in the third wild card. So there's the better probably comparison is the Royals in the American League, but the National League, I always feel like there's the bar's a little lower. You can get into the wild card, with 84 to 86 wins.
Now you're going to tell me we are going to connect somehow baseball to women's Olympic soccer.
Who would have thought?
I need to know when you told me this.
Yes.
I was very curious. I didn't even look at it. I was going to look like, what's the connection here? But you tell me, what do we got?
Okay. So women's soccer team they're going into the semifinals, right? Tomorrow, which would be Tuesday. They're one of their forwards and goal scorers, Mallory Swanson, Dansby's wife.
Oh, yeah.
And then they have a midfielder, Sam Coffey, her name is, whose sister covers used to cover the A's for the Athletic, now covers the Phillies for the Athletic, and Alex Coffey, and her dad I know well. He used to write for the New York Daily News there in New York. So a little bit of history there. They'll always have to find that connection for baseball in the Olympics. That's where we are. Women's
I
soccer.
love it. Are you glued into the Olympics?
I've been watching it almost every day. There's I love the track and field, the gymnastics, the basketball,
all of it.
I mean, all of it. And the beauty of that is if you miss it in the afternoon, you can catch it late at night. And I'm up at night, 2, 3 in the morning. It's on then too. So it's hopefully fall back asleep. How about you? You watching that?
I'm a big beach volleyball.
There you go. You can't beat that. First off,
I love beach.
That's amazing.
There's
right?
Reason why.
Yeah. But can you believe the setting that they have right by the Eiffel Tower? Like, you can't beat that.
Phenomenal. Like that. Yeah. That's like the best setting they could have possibly had. Are we? We have baseball in the Olympics in 2028. So is that for sure?
We might have major league players in. We are having baseball because it's in LA. It's here in the U.S.
Right.
The biggest question is, are we going to have major league players? And there was a pitch that was made recently in an ownership meeting. People that are organizing the LA Olympics, do you shut down the sport for a period of time to play with Major League Baseball players? And there are players, including Bryce Harper and others, that have spoken out that would love to do that. And that's the biggest thing is to get players on board. Then you got to get the owners, and you have to work out the logistics. But they might do it.
What would you want? Would you like to see it?
I'd vote for it. I never thought I would say this, but I would vote for it. I would love to see it, just because the players are all about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we could handle it as a sport if we shut it down for like 10 days to 2 weeks.
That was such phenomenal drama. Which was 2 years ago? Was it two? When was the World Baseball Classic? Or was it?
Yeah.
Was it last year?
Last spring. Yeah, 2023.
You couldn't have asked for a better ending. Two great teams, and then to have Ohtani face Trout, and just now imagine that. And that was it's like preseason, so it's hard. These guys are on the top of their game yet because they're in spring training. Now I'm out of the middle of the year where they're all kind of in a groove on that Olympic stage.
Right.
Had we had that game, I mean, that would be
Think
phenomenal.
About this. Here's I always look at this from the downside, right? From the GM side of things. Think about it from Seattle. Julio is going to play, and he's going to face George Kirby.
Yeah.
Right? Which would be amazing.
It would be phenomenal.
What if one of those guys gets hurt in the middle of your season? That's what I think about as a former GM, and that's why we don't have those things. But listen, we've gotten through it in the WBC, right? Edwin Diaz, the Mets got injured before the year last year, right? Blew out his knee in a mound. They missed him for the entire year. By the way, it derailed their season. Yeah. It can happen. That's just a cautionary tale, but I still would love to see it.
I think if the players are on board and want to do it, then let them do it.
Let's do it.
Right.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. There he is, Jim Duquette. Again, he's got his Sunday baseball show with Jim Bowden, the front office show on Sirius XM. It airs, it airs 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. here in the Pacific time zone. Sirius XM Radio, channel 89, correct?
Channel 89. And it's on demand, too. If you aren't awake on the West Coast at that time, you can
we like to sleep in. Yeah, we like to
Yes.
sleep in here on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Of course, the Jim Duquette Show here every Monday. It's brought to you by Flatstick Pub. Visit flatstickpub.com. Book your next corporate event, birthday party, whatever you want, and entertain anyone you'd like. Fantastic spot there at Flatstick Pub, flatstickpub.com. New episodes of Jim Duquette every Monday, 1 o'clock, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast, YouTube, and, of course, all the content right here at pucksports.com.